All right, everybody, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive.
Yes, it is.
And this week we are tackling omnichannel logistics.
Very exciting.
It is exciting.
Yes.
I've been reading a lot about this lately in preparation for this episode, and I'm kind of fascinated by it. So,
It's interesting.
yeah, and thankfully we've got an expert here with us to,
One would hope.
one would hope, yes.
Uh,
But yeah, I think like most people, I sort of had a vague idea of what this whole thing was. You know, when you order something online and you can pick it up in the store.
yeah, click and collect the buzzword.
Click and collect, exactly.
Yeah.
But I had no idea how much more there was to it. And thankfully, we've got this great podcast, Supply Chain Savvy by Masood Khan.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It is a good one. And he really breaks down sort of the nuts and bolts of this whole thing. And so I thought,
I was going to say, you can't talk about omnichannel logistics without going to that sort of supply chain side of it, right? Because
it's one thing to sort of have this idea and be like, yeah, we should offer customers all these different options. But
right.
how do you actually do it in a way that makes sense and doesn't totally destroy your business?
Yeah, you don't want to end up losing money because you're giving so many options.
Exactly.
You got to find that sweet spot.
So, I mean, I guess the first thing is, how do we even define this whole omni-channel thing? Because it sounds like it could be a lot of different things.
Yeah, so it's really about this seamless experience. You know, I think that's the key word here is seamless no matter where your customer is interacting with you, whether that's online,
Right.
on their phone, in the store, they're getting that same, level of service, the same information. And it's easy for them, it's convenient, and it kind of just happens magically.
Okay, so it's not just about having the same products available everywhere.
Yeah.
It's also about the experience.
Exactly.
If you're dealing with customer service or
Exactly. It should be that if you start, chatting with someone online,
right.
and then you need to go into the store, that transition is smooth, the information is there.
Right. You're not explaining to 5 different people what
You're
you...
not repeating yourself,
Yeah.
which I think we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do they make it work then? I
Yeah.
mean, that's got to be a nightmare from a logistical standpoint.
Right. So this is where the unified inventory management comes in that Khan talks about in the podcast. And, it sounds kind of jargony, but really what it means is having a really clear picture of your inventory across all of your different channels.
Okay.
So, if you have a store in New York and a warehouse in California and someone buys something online,
Right.
you know exactly how much you have, where it is, and you can get it to the customer in the most efficient way.
Okay, and so that's what that real-time inventory visibility is then.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. I mean, that's something that I as a consumer definitely appreciate because, we've all been in that situation where you order something online and then you get that email. It's like, oh, actually, we don't have that in stock.
The dreaded email.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, oh, come on.
And then you get disappointed.
Yes. And often it's not just disappointing. It's like, I needed that for a thing.
Exactly.
You know,
Get up a plan.
I had a plan. Exactly. Yeah. So, okay, so that makes sense from the consumer standpoint, but what about from the business's standpoint? How does this help them? Because it sounds like it could be really expensive to implement.
Well, so I think the big thing there is that it helps them avoid those stockouts that you were just talking about, because those stockouts equal lost sales and lost customers potentially.
Right. Yeah. If you get a reputation for never having anything in stock, people are just going to stop.
Exactly. It's that idea of, well, I'm just not even going to bother with them because they never have what I want.
Exactly.
Right. And so it also helps on the flip side with overstocking. If you have a really good handle on your inventory, you're not going to end up with a warehouse full of stuff that you can't sell.
Right.
And that obviously ties into waste and all those things.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think about traditional retail, if you own a store, you kind of have to guess okay, it's springtime. I'm going to stock up on a bunch of spring jackets and hope that people buy them. But if you're doing this whole omni-channel thing...
Right, you've got so much more data.
You've got so much more data, and you can really see, what are people actually buying?
Yeah.
And when are they buying it? And, where do they want to buy it from?
Yeah. Are people in this region buying more of this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's super interesting. And it makes a lot of sense, I think, from both sides. The customer gets what they want, and the business is not wasting a bunch of money.
Right.
Which is always a good thing.
Exactly. Finding that win-win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what else we got?
So another big piece of this is that flexible fulfillment that you mentioned earlier. And I think this is something that's really become important, I would say, even in the last couple of years, as more and more people are shopping online.
Yeah.
You know, people want options. They want to be able to choose how they get their products, whether that's, you know, standard delivery, express delivery, click and collect, curbside pickup. There are so many different options now. And I think businesses really need to be able to offer as many of those as possible to be competitive.
That's interesting you say that because I was actually just reading an article about this.
Yeah.
And it was saying that, like, particularly for younger generations,
Yes.
like, convenience is key.
Yes.
And if you can make it easier for them to get their stuff,
Exactly.
they're going to choose you over a company that's like, oh, you can only get it shipped to your house and it's going to take 2 weeks.
Right, exactly. And it's not even just about the speed, it's also about the control, you know, and some people like to be able to pick up their order on their lunch break because they know they're going to be
Right.
in that area, or, you know, they want to do curbside pickup because they have a sleeping baby in the car.
Yep.
You know, there are so many different reasons why people might choose one option over another. And
Right.
I think it's important for businesses to just be as flexible as possible and really...
So it's almost like you have to anticipate what the customer might want before they even know they want it.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
It's like you're reading their minds a little bit.
Okay, so we've got this unified inventory management. We've got flexible fulfillment.
Yes.
What else are we missing here? Because I feel like there's got to be more.
Well, and this is something that Khan talks about in the podcast, too, which I thought was really interesting, is this idea of consistent customer experience across all of these different channels.
Okay.
And I think this is one of the trickier things to get right, because it's not just about, you know, having the same products available or even having the same delivery options. It's about the entire experience.
So like the tone of your website should match the tone of
Exactly.
your in-store.
Like if you're a very kind of young and trendy brand,
Right.
and then you go into the store and it's very stuffy and...
Formal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be jarring.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's also about things like customer service.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if someone has a question, are they able to get it answered easily, whether they're on the phone, they're emailing,
Right.
they're in the store? You know, it should be that seamless experience across all of those different channels.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess that's where, like, you know, technology comes in, because you've got to have some way of, like, keeping track of all this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where data synchronization comes in, which again sounds very jargony.
It does.
But it's essential,
Yeah.
because it's basically how you make sure that all of your different systems are talking to each other.
Okay.
So your inventory management system is talking to, your point of sale system is talking to your e-commerce platform.
Right.
And all of that data is being shared in real time so that everyone has the most up-to-date information.
Okay. And I'm assuming that if you don't have that, then things can go wrong pretty quickly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can imagine if someone buys something online and then that information doesn't get relayed to the warehouse.
Right.
And then they go to the store to pick it up and it's not there.
Right. It's back to the dreaded email.
Exactly. It just creates a whole bunch of problems.
Yeah. And I feel like as a customer, we often don't think about that side of it.
Yeah.
You know, we just expect things to work. But there's so much going on behind the scenes to make it all happen.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes omnichannel logistics so challenging, is that it's really complex.
Right.
There are a lot of moving pieces.
Sure.
But when it's done well, it's really impressive.
It is impressive.
And it really does make a difference for the customer.
Yeah. And I think, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier about building trust,
Yeah.
if you are a company that can consistently deliver on that promise of, like, yeah, you can order this online, you can pick it up in an hour.
Right.
Like, that builds a lot of trust with the customer.
Exactly. It shows that you're reliable.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
trustworthy, and that you're really putting their needs first.
Okay, so we've talked about the good, now we have to talk about the bad.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that companies get wrong when it comes to omnichannel?
Oh gosh, so many things.
I bet.
I think one of the biggest ones is just not having a clear strategy from the outset.
Okay.
You know, a lot of companies kind of jump into omnichannel because they feel like they have to.
Right, it's trendy.
Exactly. But they don't really think through what it means for their business.
Right.
You know, they don't think about the technology they're going to need, the processes they're going to have to put in place,
Right.
the training they're going to have to do for their staff.
So it's like anything else in business, you got to have a plan.
Exactly.
You can't just, like, wing it.
You can't just wing it.
Yeah, okay.
I think another big mistake is not putting enough emphasis on the customer experience.
Right.
A lot of companies, they focus so much on the logistics of it all
Right.
that they forget that ultimately it's about the customer.
Right. It's not about moving boxes around. It's about
Yes. Yeah.
making the customer happy.
Right.
Yeah.
And if the customer's not happy, then you're not doing it right.
Okay. And I think that's a good point to end on because ultimately that's what it's all about. Like if you're a business and you're listening to this, think about it from your customer's perspective.
Yes.
Like what are they looking for? What are their pain points? And how can you use this whole omni-channel thing to make their lives easier?
Exactly. And if you can do that, then you're going to be successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great.
It's been fun.
And for everybody listening, we will be back next week with another deep dive.
See you then.
See you then.